Hey folks, welcome to Running Retro. This is part 2 of the Dreamcast Piggyback BIOS mod. So I had run one 30 gauge piece of Kynar wire through the small via and soldered it down, and now we're trimming up the other end of it and we're soldering it to pin 44 of the piggybacked chip. So this is not going to the original BIOS chip, this is going to the piggybacked chip. This wire can be a little bit finicky, it's a little bit small, so just be aware of that and be careful with it. I use tweezers. I hate tweezers on this sort of stuff because it always ends up pinching the sleeve of the wire, but you know, it's the best thing for it. And all of my tweezers are a little bit sharp. If you have sort of wider, flatter tweezers, then you know, they're a little bit better for that. But it's what it is. You use what you have. Just make sure that you haven't stressed or broken the wire. As long as you get a good solder joint on there, then you're fine. And again, that's soldering to pin 44, the very last pin on the chip. Just tap it and get a nice bead there. The best way that I got here was to get the wire end, the pin, and the leg on the chip onto the tweezers, because you don't want to accidentally tug on the wire when it's holding when it's actually soldered to the leg and break the leg off. I mean, at least it's the piggyback chip, so it's not like you've destroyed your system, but you know, it is one of those things of just sort of for safe practice, you probably want to be a little bit more careful. Pardon the cat in the background. She's desperate for a pet because I'm standing here recording. If you want to get attention from a cat, just ignore them or do something else. It's important. So here, finally lifting pin 12 of the original BIOS chip. Now it should be just directly below pin 12 of the top chip, but I count it off anyway because that way you know, if you've made a mistake on the top chip, there's still time to fix that. Take your time with this. I use a dental pick and just sort of slide it underneath. Sometimes that's effective. It's really good at just moving it a little bit and not a bunch. You want to make sure that it's no longer making contact. But if you're having trouble or you don't have a dental pick, then you can also use an X-Acto knife. Some pins I have a little trouble using this pick on, so when I hit that point, then I do resort to an X-Acto knife, and I pick a really thin blade and lay it as flush to the board as I possibly can. But yeah, you can see that just does a nice little, really, really gentle lift on that pin. So you're not stressing it too much. We will still need to lift pin 1 of this chip on this particular mod. I had forgotten. So that is something that we need to do, and we will get to. Now I'm trimming wire up and getting it ready for the final few connections here. And that leg lift right there is hands down the scariest part of this mod. So here you need a 10K resistor. So that's what I'm lining up here. and we're wrapping it around. So I'm trying to just line it up and form it as best as I can so I can cut it. I personally like to cut one leg really short so that it just joins straight up to one of the legs of the chip. And then the rest of the bulk of the resistor is just all loose there. Sometimes that's not possible because it's too far away. And I've tried a couple different angles, going over the chip, going around the chip. It doesn't really matter as long as if you go over the chip, then you need to make sure that you're not going to touch the top shielding and short it out. But if you put some tape on it to make sure that that's not going to happen, then you should be fine. Now, once you solder this resistor to that bottom leg, you need to be really, really careful that you don't catch the resistor on anything, because if you snap that leg, you're in a lot of trouble and you're in for a lot of grief. That's one of the reasons why I don't straighten that leg out. I just go slowly here, I take my time, and I solder it including the bend there. And then because the resistor is sort of staying low there, that means that I don't have nearly as much trouble keeping it solid. And then where I'm bending it on those tweezers there, that makes sure that I'm not bending the leg, because if you aren't thinking and you bend the leg, then you're really in for a hard time. And I'm always trying to support the resistor here and give it as much strength as I can, and that way I'm not doing any damage to it. We're just going right around the corner here, so pin 23 right around the corner. And this is the lifting the leg is the most hair-raising part, but if I had to pick one, this is the next hair-raising part for me. I like to get my angles super sharp here. It can be a little bit difficult, and the resistor sometimes doesn't want to work with you, so you're just going to have to take your time with this and be gentle with it, because if you are anytime you're dealing with pin 12 on the original chip, just take your time and spend more time than you need to on it, if that's what's going to take to be gentle with it. Here I just curl this around and solder it too, and you can solder it too and then snip the length, so with your flush cuts. And that's what I do here. Sorry about the camera. I keep bumping the camera. Getting used to this setup, and clearly I am not. Be careful not to touch your soldering iron to the plastic of this plastic right next to it there, because you will melt that and you will make a mess. That's a problem. As I said, there's the flush cuts, just right, snip it right off. There you go. Good to go. Just making sure that I have continuity, that I haven't broken. You need to make sure that you haven't, when you solder that you haven't broken the solder joint between the top pin and the bottom pin, between the piggybacked chip pin leg and the original leg, because that makes for an unhappy moment. Now, I have tried to tinker with ways to not bend down these pins that you have to bend back out, but except for one time and something I did that was stupid, I've never had one of those pins break. So I just be careful with them. Don't bend them too much, um, and then you can straighten them out a little bit. They tend to be reasonably resilient. If you bend it like 2 more times, it's gonna break, but you can get a couple breaks here and there. I mean, a couple bends here and there. Hopefully, you don't get a couple breaks here and there. Now, here, I like to use the leg like this just to get more surface area attached to more surface area of the resistor attached to the leg. But maybe the better way to do this, and you can sort of decide what you prefer, but maybe the better way to do this is to just lay it across both pins and just solder it like that. It just has to make connections, so it shouldn't be that big a deal. And on the other side, in fact, I can't remember whether I actually do exactly that or not. Looks like I'm gonna bend it. Yeah, I've decided to bend it. And again, be careful here because you already have these pins. Like, I am probably tweaking that leg 12 on the piggyback chip. I'm tweaking that a little bit much, but I'm aware of that and I'm trying to be careful of it. So just, be as gentle as you possibly can with that. And if you're doing what I'm doing right here, make sure not to cut too far, flush cut too far. And I'm aware I'm putting a little stress on pin 12, but that was almost through and I didn't want to risk trying to snip it, getting down really close, and then like the snip slipping or something like that and breaking the leg off. So I just made a judgment call there and continued on as I was. And that's it for your resistors. So they're not too bad. They're not too bad. Now the thing that's going to be a little bit of a pain, and you'll see we're going to solder a wire between pin 1 and pin 44 and then a couple of the wires to the switch. But if you look up at pin 44 there, that kind of wire, when I soldered it down, it melted some of the jacket off. That jacket is not touching anything, but you need to be really careful to make sure that it isn't. I did look at that. I did pay attention to it. And it was not touching, and it wasn't. Once it's in and it's closed, it's not in too much of a risk of doing that. But just be aware of that. This process can be a little bit frustrating because you're soldering 3 things together. That can always be a little bit frustrating. I find the best method for me is to just grab a pair of tweezers, compress all 3 of them together, and then there you go. And this is going to wrap around and connect to pin 44. At least it's a nice short jump instead of wrapping around the whole board or something like that. I'm never satisfied with these joins. I mean, they're fine, but there's just something about them. I always want to get them better, and even when they're good, I always want to get them better. I'm sorry, not to pin 44. To the resistor here on the original BIOS chip, pin 12. Obviously, you need to be careful here because you don't want to put too much tension on that and break pin 1. But, just be aware of that. This is... Need to make sure you clean your wire if you do this, but you can get a very small amount of jacket off this way. And a lot of times when I'm working on really fine wire, this is a method that I don't mind employing. But I definitely check my connections after I do this sort of stuff, because you want to make sure that it was actually clean by the time you were done and all that good stuff. Usually take some tweezers too and just clean it up. There's no doubt about it that my soldering iron is a nice little soldering iron, but it very often is not hot on some sections. It's only hot on a couple sections at the very tip. I don't like that, but I haven't had any trouble with it when I've actually been working on these projects, so I've just let it be. Got some nice clean wire there. Jacket's a little bit messy, but I do believe in fluxing everything. Just making sure there's no oxidation here is a good thing. But you can solder it without if you want, or you can just apply it one area and not the other. But I personally recommend fluxing all of it. I hate this wire, but not as much as the one that goes along with it on pin 12. I give it a little tug so it's on there. I know it's on there. Making sure that I've got continuity. I do. We're good. There's my switch. So we're going to prep this with its 3 wires. Now I did drill a hole in the side of the Dreamcast, and that's unavoidable. Once you've done this mod, you have altered your case and you cannot alter it back. So just be aware of that. That is the one altercation. But I'm okay with that, because at the end of the day, even if I have to alter the case a little bit, if my console gets full functionality at the cost of drilling a hole, then I'm okay with that. Like, for instance, the NES RGB mod, you need to drill a hole in the back and do a couple things like that, drill a hole for a switch. I don't mind that stuff, that's fine. So there we go, all tinned up. Got my 3 wires. And we'll get these 3 wires connected. And I pulled it away just a hair too fast. I hate that. I'm bad about that. I like to get these on first, and then if I need to add a little bit more solder, fine. But at least if they're soldered in, then you're kind of good to go. And my helping hands here are not very helpful, I might add. it's not really a good way to hold the switch. Although, if I had clamped it along the actual rectangular section as opposed to on the actual switch, that would have been a lot easier. And I have done that in the past, but I didn't think of it here. And that's what it is. So again, I'm going to reference Monkey. He's where I originally looked up how to do this mod, and this is on a VA1 board. If you want to get the full instructions on how to do this, then you should definitely just Google him. Piggyback Dreamcast BIOS, Monkey. But I was hoping that this would be helpful to see if you were looking at the pictures and hadn't seen what was going on. Then you could look here and see an example. Or if you're just trying to do it for the first time and wanted to watch a video on it, see how in-depth it is and what it entails. I hate splitting the ends of these wires. They're always a little bit awkward and irritating, but when done, at least they're ready for you. Tin them early, get them ready. They like to give me a struggle too. And you'll note that this is the real time it's taking me to do these mods. If I had to walk away from the board or something, I've edited that out. But for the most part, if you want to see how long and how in-depth this is going to be for, maybe not your first time through, it might take a little bit longer. But for one of your initial run-throughs of this, what you're watching is probably about what you can expect as you're getting used to where things are. I did have a decent prior knowledge of what was actually going into this before I did this mod, and I'd done a couple others. So, but they had all had bad chips, so I had to undo it a number of times because the chips were bad. They were all corrupt, but in this case, these were, I bought some nicer chips for this and found a way to test them. So yeah, these wires are a pain, and make sure you know where it's going, because it's easy to lose track. It's not like it's just 1, 2, 3. They cross over each other. They're all twisted. They're not just straightforward, unfortunately. And this is the one I hate the most, because you always end up desoldering the resistor when you're doing this. Because you already need 2 hands. It's just, if you just get it on there and it's good, leave it. Check continuity, but leave it. And then the last one is pretty easy. Once you've got pin 12 on the original chip soldered down and the resistor hasn't broken free and you've got your power there, then this last wire is a lot easier. Be careful not to burn your other wires when you're going through here too, because it gets to be a little bit of a nest of wires here, but it's not, not too horrible. And I just tacked it on there so that I didn't get up into the BIOS. When you're putting this on, the easiest way is to run the wire next to the GD-ROM and out out the top here, so that it doesn't pinch it. but it also secures it, because you don't want this switch tugging on the BIOS, because you can still break these pins. It's still connected to these pins, so don't forget that when you're putting this back together. Be careful of where your switch is. Be careful of what's going on here. And yeah, if you're careful with it, you can make sure that it's not going to get pinched or destroyed or rip off one of the legs of the chip. That's just, yeah, be very, very aware of what you're doing. And I screw these in by hand because I'm making sure that I'm not pinching the wire too much, that it's got clearance, that it's not got a problem, it's not too short or too long. So that's what I'm doing here. And with that, this top shielding will start to hold everything in place. Being a little careful here, because again, when I get to this point, I'm afraid of my sleeve catching the switch, or this is the point where you feel like you're done, but you aren't really done. So it's a little bit tedious to take the extra time, because you feel like you're done. You just want to throw it back together. But it's exactly in that moment when something always ends up going wrong, and not because you did something wrong, but because you get impatient and slap it back together. So just putting the plate back on now. And you'll notice all of my wires were bent down a little bit so that they aren't going to touch this plate. They aren't lifted up. If you think they're going to lift up, then you want to put some insulating tape on there so that it doesn't it doesn't short out to this plate, because that will kill your system. You will have a brick. Yep, just fits in there. I go behind that screw hole. And now, once I've got that there, my switch is pretty nice and snug. I like to get everything here hooked back up before I actually put the switch through. I do that last. Keep it to the side. The other reason is because the lid, while it's open, will tug on it a little bit. So, just to, on the off chance that I slip up or do something wrong there, then I like to make sure that I've got as many eyes on the parts that are likely to do damage as I can. And if I don't have to worry about the top flopping around, me catching it, elbowing it, something slipping, catching it, something else falling and hitting it, and either snapping the wires there on the switch, which who cares, that's not bad. I mean, you don't want to do it if you can help it, but that's not the end of the world. And but if it were to tug one of the pin legs, then you'd be in a tight spot. Sometimes this can be a little stubborn going back in, but it's fine. I did end up doing a Pico PSU mod on this particular system because of needing to have more space there when trying to fit a SSD in here. Might still do an SD card, but I don't think so. The easiest way to do that is to wire it in the serial port, and I'd rather have the speed over an IDE cable as compared to the speed over an SD card through serial. That doesn't seem that great. So I'm hooking up the power switch right now, put in the controller ports, and then put in the fan up top. just not satisfied with that screw. It just didn't want to go back in. And, you know, it's because the board is lifted, the shield is lifted just a hair because of those wires going to the CPU legs, or the PPU legs. So, pardon, the BIOS legs. So, doesn't hurt to just be a little bit careful and tidy it up. Get that controller board up there. Get everything hooked back up. Get the fan reinstalled. I don't like the Dreamcast fan mods. They're better. They are better. They give you better airflow, and they're a lot quieter. But I don't like them because of how they ultimately end up fitting in the console. I think that they are garish and messy. And I'm currently trying to come up with a way to do that that's a little more elegant, a little cleaner, and is just as good as far as, you know, sound and efficiency. I currently haven't had a fan die on me yet either, though they do sound horrible. They do sound horrible. Oh. Just tightening down the controller port as we speak. Sorry, I didn't get that on camera. Again, if people really want me to do a full breakdown of the Dreamcast, this is more about installing the Piggyback BIOS than it is full disassembly and reassembly of a Dreamcast. But if you want to see full disassembly and reassembly of a Dreamcast, I will happily show you in a later video. Just leave a comment down below and let me know, and I will put that up. So the last real part here is to install this switch into the top of the Dreamcast case, and you have to be very careful where you put this switch. I put it towards the front on the side because that's where I wanted it, but you need to make sure that you have enough clearance. And the first time I did this, I was thinking about clearance. I forgot about where the fan is. So don't forget about that fan, and don't forget about the fact that, you know, everything is going to have to be together, and this switch is still going to have to be there. I did try to get it as short a line run as possible as well. It's one of the reasons I put it where I did. You can't go above it because the top shield there stops you from running a line out, or you end up running it through the fan. So this is the best spot that I've found for it. Actually, if you're looking at the front of the console, to the fan will be on the right. Look just behind the fan, and there's a little window there that one of these little 3-position toggle switches will go in there. It's a single pole double throw switch. And here we go. So all we need to do is just unscrew the top of that switch, run it through the Dreamcast lid, screw the switch into the lid. This is my old Dreamcast, so it's kind of beat up. Pardon that. That's not from doing this mod. That's just, you know, your first console. It's gonna be a little bit finicky. It just, you know, be careful. Remember that the more you turn this, you can twist these wires and break them off. So what I like to do is lift it up And if you have helping hands or you have something like that, you can hold the top of the lid and let the lid hang from the hands, so it's not hanging on the wires. And then I take a pair of pliers on the outside and a pair of pliers on the inside, hold the inside so that it doesn't turn, and turn the outside. And that way you're not putting undue stress on the wires themselves. And you can see me just working that down right here and making sure the switch toggles, all that good stuff. Aligning it a little bit, you can do a little bit of alignment, but if you give it a full 380-degree twist, then you will start breaking the wires. And if you tug too much on them, then you still run the risk of breaking a leg and having to take it all apart from here and undo everything you just did is not something that's fun or pleasant. So thanks for watching, guys, and we'll see you next time.